y'all, we are doing it. This is episode 1 of The Couch Reimagined via YouTube. I really wanted to go in depth around some things as it relates to ethics. So my question is, but is it ethical? I find that question comes up a lot. So let's dive into it. The policing that happens within this profession from other clinicians and our peers. While I think that the question of, but is that ethical? But is that unethical? Those two questions, I think they're super necessary in our profession, but I think that they are heavily relied on and used to eventually police rather than free. And I'll tell you what I mean about that. Many therapists do use this question for good. And we are always questioning, is that ethical? Did I do that right? Did I overstep? Do I need to back up? And I do think that we need to be asking ourselves those questions. I do think that that's something that should remain a priority in the work that we do. But what ends up happening most of all is when we're asking that question of, but is it ethical? But is that unethical? We're using it as a way to prohibit ourselves and other people who are doing this work from showing up. We use it in a way to make people feel ashamed and to feel fearful of just showing up, putting things out there, speaking their mind, using their voice. So I do think, again, we should be asking ourselves, is this ethical? And I think we should be asking it from a place of, are we providing good quality care? Are we making sure that clients are not harmed? But far too often, I'm seeing this question asked from other providers to their peers and other colleagues about every little thing that they see their colleagues do. And what it does is end up creating this inferiority complex amongst colleagues. And we scare each other, honestly, into doing anything, so much so that people just don't even want to show up and they say, you know what, I'm just not even going to do that. And how that hurts us is there's a lot of misinformation being put out on the internet around what mental health is, what mental health is not. And so the more afraid we are to show up, the more we're leaving it to other people to speak for our profession. So if we aren't the ones who are speaking about mental health, about diagnosing, if we aren't the people dispelling myths, talking about credentialing, putting our expertise out there, helping share what we know, then we're leaving it up to people who have very little credentials or education in this area to make mental health what it is. But a lot of that comes from many of us being afraid to speak up, speak out, because we think that somebody's going to catch us doing something wrong, or what we're doing is actually going to be unethical. What I find to be interesting is that asking the question, but is that ethical? Is that unethical? I mainly see this question running around in those therapist groups, therapist communities that are supposed to empower and uplift, but what it ends up doing is catching therapists doing something wrong every time they ask a question. So people begin to feel unsafe even asking the minor questions, the things that they should be consulting with their colleagues about. And what I find to be deep down going on is that some of these therapists who are always policing other therapists are really just using this question of ethics, or is it unethical, is it ethical, as a means to cover up their own fear and as a means to actually prohibit other therapists from doing what they themselves are afraid to do. They are afraid to speak up. They are afraid to speak out. They have insecurities. They feel inferior. They feel unsure, uncertain. And so they try to make other people feel unsure and uncertain as well. And I see this happening in so many groups. And I think it's such a detriment to this profession as a whole, because we can't disseminate information in the ways that it is actually intended. And so when I'm thinking about this question and when I see it and I'm seeing the conversation around ethics, and I hear people tell me, other therapists who I've worked with say, I'm just so sick of always being policed around what terms I use if I'm not using them correctly. It's almost like there's no space to grow. There's no space to be wrong. There's no space to be human. And so people end up weaponizing this idea of ethics. It's basically like self-erasure of yourself, self-erasure of your colleagues, and ultimately self-erasure of the field of mental health as credible altogether. And I know people are like, oh, that's going too far, but it's actually not. Because the more you make the people who are experts afraid to speak up, the more you leave it to people who are not experts to tell us what's going on. And that's why we have clients coming in thinking that they have all these diagnoses or even some made up diagnoses because they don't have the therapists in these public spaces that we need to have them speaking up, sharing information, providing education, and just being available and accessible to folks. We create a real problem for the people that we are actually supposed to be serving. So when you see other therapists ask therapists like, well, is it ethical that you have a public profile? Is it ethical that you're sharing insights that you gained in a session? What we end up doing ultimately is telling other therapists, don't do too much. Don't be too much. Don't use your voice. Don't be visible. Don't be accessible. And ultimately, don't be human. So ethics has been used as a weapon against each other when therapists are merely being human. And I think that that's a very colonized way to approach this field and to engage in this field. And so many of us, for the clients that we serve who belong to marginalized groups, we're trying to work away from that. But we are holding each other and caging each other in the same way that this field has done in the past with its colonization and its harm towards the very clients that we want to help free and advocate for. So I said all that to say there are some things that are absolutely not unethical, and I want to get into those. First, being public on social media is not in and of itself unethical. So many people, I remember when I got out of grad school, a lot of times people were saying, well, your profile, I even had a colleague tell me that my profile needed to be private, that I didn't need to be public on social media. My entire life's work as a mental health clinician is to be accessible. If I don't have a social media profile, how am I accessible to the people who are getting their information from the social media places, the platforms? How is that okay to act like I'm not a part of the very community that I actually intend to serve? So I encourage us to really question and be critical thinkers in terms of where are the people hanging out at that I want to see? Where are the people hanging out at that I want to work with? Where are the people getting their information from who ultimately come and work with me? They're hanging out on social media platforms. So if I'm not accessible and I'm only leaving it up to them finding me by some illustrious website, then I'm actually not doing a great job at providing even the initial steps of quality care to the people I intend to serve. Another thing is talking about and wanting to be paid your worth is not in and of itself unethical. It is totally okay to talk about fees, to talk about payment, and to talk about money. Inherently in this field, I remember even going through my own training, we were made to feel like talking about money was so bad and we shouldn't be talking about money to our clients because many of our clients don't have money. And while that's true, it also perpetuates this stigma that all of mental health suffers from financial hardship. And that's just not true. It kind of sends this message that people who are indeed mental health service users are somehow not financially stable. And that is a huge bias. And that is concerning if that's the way you think about all the people that you work with, is that they don't have the wherewithal to be financially secure, financially stable, and emotionally intelligent enough to have finance conversations. So we want to check that within yourself. I remember talking about this in one of my programs, is that we ultimately are if we talk about not talking about money amongst each other, and we shouldn't be talking about that with clients, what we're overall saying is that the people who use our services are not in great financial places. And while that's true for some, that's not true for everyone. So what we're doing is showing our own biases around who we think we're serving. And that is problematic. Having limits and taking breaks and prioritizing yourself is not unethical. We can't teach the people we serve to take care of themselves, advocate for themselves, if we ourselves aren't doing the same. Recognizing your limits is how you serve your clients to the highest degree. If you know you're not in the space or have capacity to do something, care for them, see 7 clients in a day, your responsibility to yourself and to your clients is to say, my limit is 4. Because by the time you get to client 5, 6, or 7, they're getting a fraction of who you are, and that's not fair to them when they're expecting you to show up as your full self. So the best we can do for our clients is say, hey, that's my limit. In order for me to serve you the best I can, I want to be able to show up fully, and my capacity is that I can't do X, Y, and Z. There is nothing unethical about saying, this is my capacity. I recognize that training in grad school teaches us that we need to be available to everybody and everything, but that's just not possible. That's not even realistic. When you are working in clinical settings, some of us are engulfed in our work more than we are sometimes engulfed in our own personal lives. So when we're sharing education, psychoeducation, it is not inherently unethical to share insights that you are gaining from therapy sessions. Granted, it is unethical to use clients' names. It is unethical to use information that may allow that client to be recognized or identified. But sharing your own insights that come from session work is not unethical. And I see that so much with other therapists saying you shouldn't be sharing anything that came up in therapy. That is absolutely not possible to even kind of, in a processing way, that's not even realistic, because a lot of what we're doing inside of session is processing alongside the client. And so when we're using information, sharing it as public knowledge, we're sharing our own insights and things that came up in session that does not leave the client identifiable. But when we get into these groups, you hear people saying, and mainly it's people who don't understand their own ethics, saying you shouldn't be saying anything that came up in therapy session, and that's just not realistic, which is why even in training, there were case studies. Those case studies came from somewhere, right? And so this is a conversation that you want to be having with your clients. If you are indeed a public-facing person, you want to be having conversations with your clients around, hey, I am a public-facing therapist. There are some platforms that I'm on social media. There are times I will talk about what came up for me in session. How do you feel about that? What are your concerns about that? Are there any concerns about that? And so before any of us even have the opportunity to have those conversations with our clients, we have other therapists in certain groups saying, that's not ethical. You shouldn't be doing that. And so it just makes people so afraid to even share public knowledge that could be helpful for all types of folks, and folks who don't have money to go to these sessions, but actually get a little bit from you even sharing some psychoeducation on your social media profile. When we don't name systems that are actively harming our clients, we are actually doing our clients harm. And that in and of itself, for me, feels unethical. So when you are sitting in session with clients who are in marginalized groups or people who are harmed by systems, things that are happening in our society that are directly harming them, leading to depression, leading to anxiety, and we're not naming those things, I feel like we're doing a disservice to our clients. Okay? I feel like naming systemic issues is our duty and our responsibility. But what I feel like happens inside of some of these groups or inside the therapy community, a lot of therapists shun and shame other therapists for naming systemic issues that are indeed present. There are a lot of things going on for our clients that if they were not going on would leave our clients feeling a lot better and a much better quality of life. So sometimes our clients are dealing with things that leave them feeling depressed, like poverty, food deserts, financial strain, lack of access. If those things were available to them, they might not feel the emotional distress or turmoil that they feel, and they may not actually have the anxiety and depression that they are experiencing. And naming that for them is very validating at times. So when you're met with another colleague telling you that you shouldn't be naming all of these things, you shouldn't be talking about that, you shouldn't be bringing any of yourself in the room, I just don't agree. I think that that's necessary, especially if you're working with marginalized groups or folks who are specifically being harmed by the systems that are continuously reinforced in our society. That leads me to my last point. I see so much conversation around disclosure in sessions and disclosure in public spaces like social media. It is absolutely okay for you to share bits and pieces of yourself on your social media profile. That goes back to my point number one. Who said that we need to have private profiles, and how is that unethical? And it's totally okay for you to connect with your clients, especially if your clients are marginalized groups, folks who are Black, brown, indigenous. That's the way we collectively bond and engage in community, is by having shared stories. And if you are a clinician who does not believe that you are a part of your community, I believe that you yourself are detaching yourself and creating the space that is sometimes harmful in session with clients, and that is sometimes harmful to the therapeutic process. It creates this power dynamic that you sit high and look low when we don't see ourselves as part of the community. So ultimately, I do believe that sometimes it is necessary to answer clients' questions about us. Do you have kids? Instead of the thing that we learned in training is like, well, what if I did have kids? And Then what would that mean to you if I did have kids? Well, are you married? Well, what would that mean to you if I were married? Well, do you shop at the grocery store? Well, what would that mean to you? We don't always have to reflect and deflect back to the client. We can sometimes answer their questions depending on if it's necessary for the therapeutic processing. Yes, I do have kids. No, I don't have kids. Yes, I did experience that. I do know what that feels like. Because clients are coming to us with so many different lived experiences and feeling invalidated in this profession already, that knowing who is sitting in front of them sometimes gives them the comfort and security that they have been seeking this whole time. Not answering their questions and pretending like nothing phases you or that you're not human further takes them out of the room and makes them further detached from the entire process, which is not good. So the next time you find yourself asking yourself questions like, is that ethical? Well, is that ethical? Every time a client shares something about like, oh, I had a disturbance, my dog was barking in session, and here come the therapy police. Well, that's unethical. You should not have your dogs barking. Like, when do therapists get a chance to be human? We all talk about how human we want to be, but we can't be human when we are policing each other in a way that keeps us suppressed, hidden, quiet, silenced, and feeling fearful and shame around every little thing that we do. This profession is about practice. And if we aren't allowed to practice and get better, what does that say for our field as a whole? What does that say about us and where we're hoping to go? Okay, that's session 1, y'all. So we're going to be having conversations like this. Well, I do have something I want to close out each session with. What we're going to do is we're going to close out each session with a prompt that you can work on from my therapy cards. Okay? And the prompt that I want to work on today is, it's going to come from the mindset category. And it says, what negative thoughts or judgments do you have about yourself right now? I want to take this a step further. What negative judgments do you have about yourself, your colleagues, this profession right now? And I want you to sit with that. I want you to see what comes up for you. But every session, we're going to end with something to reflect on. And it's going to come from my therapy cards. If you're interested in getting yourself a deck of these for yourself, your practice, family members, you can go to mytherapycards.shop. If you are interested in working with me and consulting, feel free to shoot me an email. My information will be below. I know I talk fast. If you need to rewind it, go back and rewind it. I've tried to censor myself over the years and slow down my talking, but I'm just a fast talker. And that's why I wanted to do videos, so you can stop and go at your own pace and you can rewind if you need to. But this is the couch for your imagine, y'all. I really want y'all to think about some things that you've held as true that may not be true after all. I look forward to talking to y'all at the next session. And until then, all right, I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.